He mocked me at my birthday party. In front of everyone. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Avery James. I'm 29 years old, and for the past 5 years I've been in a relationship with Ryan Collins. I've always been the kind of person who works hard, keeps her head down and tries to build a life step by step. I'm not flashy, but I put my heart into the people I care about. That's why when my birthday came around I wanted something small and genuine. I planned a dinner at my favorite little restaurant, the kind of place where you feel comfortable and close to the people around you. I invited my closest friends, my brother and of course Ryan. The evening started out well enough. The table was warm with laughter and the smell of good food. My friends handed me small, thoughtful gifts and I remember feeling grateful for how simple and kind it all was. Then Ryan opened his mouth. At first it was a light jab, the kind of thing couples sometimes say to each other. He joked about how long it took me to get ready and I brushed it off. But then he went further. He started poking fun at my job, saying I wasn't really successful because I didn't make as much as some of our friends. People at the table gave these awkward laughs, the kind that come when no one knows if they're supposed to laugh or stay quiet. I could feel my cheeks burning, but Ryan wasn't finished. He commented on my weight, on how my cooking could use some practice, and then even made a snide remark about my family. The kind of things you don't ever expect your partner to say, especially in front of people who matter to you. Every word cut a little deeper. I forced a smile, trying not to let it show how much it hurt, but inside I was breaking. In that moment, looking around the table at my uncomfortable friends and my brother shifting in his chair, I realized something I had been ignoring for too long. This wasn't just about one bad joke or one bad night. This was about respect, or rather the lack of it. And Ryan had just shown me, in front of everyone, exactly how little respect he had for me. I couldn't take it anymore. The laughter, the awkward glances, Ryan's voice carrying over the table like I was some kind of punchline, it all blurred together until my chest felt tight. I pushed back my chair, grabbed my purse and walked out before anyone could stop me. I didn't even look at Ryan. Behind me, I heard him say something else, another joke at my expense, and the sound of it followed me out the door like a cruel echo. The cool night air hit my face, and only then did I realize tears were streaming down my cheeks. My birthday, my night, had turned into a public humiliation. As I hurried down the street, memories rushed in one after another, filling the silence. This wasn't new. Ryan had been chipping away at me for years, only tonight he'd done it with an audience. I remembered the way he would roll his eyes whenever I talked about my career goals, telling me I should be more realistic. I remembered the times he'd insisted on handling our money, making it seem like he was being responsible, but somehow it always left me scraping by while he spent without thinking. Worst of all, I remembered how often he dismissed my feelings, telling me I was too sensitive whenever I tried to stand up for myself. I reached the corner of the street and stopped, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. My phone buzzed, and when I looked, it was Megan. She'd slipped out of the restaurant after me and found me sitting on a bench nearby. She wrapped her arms around me without saying a word at first. Then she pulled back and looked me straight in the eye. "Avery, you can't keep letting him do this to you," she said softly but firmly. "This isn't love. You deserve so much better." Her words hit harder than Ryan's insults ever had because they were true. I had been making excuses, hoping things would get better, convincing myself that this was just how relationships worked. But deep down I knew Megan was right. I had been shrinking myself to make space for him, and it had cost me my happiness. That night, lying awake in my bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt a calm clarity settle over me. No more excuses. No more waiting for Ryan to change. He had shown me exactly who he was, and I finally believed it. This was the end. I wasn't going to let him control me or tear me down any longer. When I finally let myself think about everything clearly, it hit me just how much I had been carrying on my shoulders for years. I was the one keeping our home together. Month after month, I was the one making sure the rent didn't fall behind. Whenever something unexpected came up, a late bill, a broken appliance, or a payment Ryan couldn't handle, it always came out of my pocket. I told myself I was being supportive, that this was what commitment looked like. But somewhere along the line, support turned into sacrifice, and I was the only one making it. I can still remember when Ryan's credit mess started piling up. He came to me worried and frustrated, and I stepped in because I didn't want to see him sink. I thought it was temporary. I thought once he got back on his feet, things would balance out. Instead it became the routine. He leaned on me without hesitation and I kept giving even when it stretched me thin. The lowest point was when he came up with that so-called business idea. He had convinced me it would change everything, that it was our chance to finally move forward. He didn't just need my encouragement, he needed my signature. Against my better judgment, I co-signed that loan, thinking it was an investment in our future together. It turned out to be nothing more than another burden I carried. The business fizzled out before it ever started, but the debt stayed right where it was, tied to my name. Over time, I noticed the shift in his attitude. At the beginning, he seemed grateful, even humbled by what I did for him. But that gratitude didn't last. Soon it wasn't "thank you" anymore. It was "of course you'll handle it." He acted like my efforts weren't sacrifices at all but obligations, as if I owed him. He became comfortable with it, too comfortable. He would sit around while I worked late nights, then have the nerve to throw little digs at me as though I wasn't doing enough. That realization cut deep. I wasn't his equal. I was his provider, his cushion, his backup plan. And all the while, instead of building me up, he chipped away at me with words that left me feeling smaller and smaller. It was like I was financing his entire life while he drained every bit of my energy and respect. I knew I couldn't just walk away without preparing myself first. Everything between Ryan and me was so tangled together that if I made one wrong move, I could end up with even more on my shoulders. That's when I decided to reach out to the two people I trusted most, Megan and my brother Daniel. Megan was the first person I opened up to. We sat across from each other in her living room and I laid out the situation piece by piece. She listened without interrupting, her face showing both concern and frustration on my behalf. When I was finished, she leaned forward and told me I had to think smarter, not harder. "You can't just leave it messy," she said. "He'll drag you back in if you're not protected. You need to make sure he has nothing to hold over you." Her words gave me clarity. I had been so focused on the emotional side of things that I hadn't fully considered the practical side. A few days later, I sat down with Daniel. He wasn't surprised when I told him everything, but I could see the anger flash in his eyes. He asked me direct questions about what accounts were in my name and whether I had signed for anything connected to Ryan. When I admitted that I had, he didn't scold me, he just laid it out plain and simple. "If your name is tied to it, you're the one on the hook. That means you've got to be careful. Quietly distance yourself. Make sure when you leave there's nothing he can use to pull you back in." His advice was firm but protective, and it gave me the push I needed. So I started to move in silence. I went to a bank on the other side of town and opened an account that Ryan knew nothing about. For the first time in years, I had a place where my money was mine alone. The next step was redirecting my income, making sure my hard work no longer went into the pool he treated like his own. Each change felt like a small piece of freedom. On top of that, I began gathering proof. I kept copies of transfers, receipts, and bills showing just how much I had covered. Every document was tucked away where Ryan would never find it. I didn't let on that anything was different at home. Outwardly, I acted the same as always, but inside I was already halfway out the door. I wasn't ready to confront him, not yet. First, I needed everything lined up, every loose end tied. Only then would I be ready. At home, the cracks started to show. Ryan wasn't completely oblivious, and he could sense something had shifted between us. He began watching me more closely, asking why I was staying late at work or why I kept my phone closer than usual. I brushed it off, pretending everything was fine, but I could feel his suspicion growing. Instead of talking to me directly, he lashed out in petty ways. One night when I cooked dinner, he poked at the food and smirked, saying it wasn't worth the effort. Another day, he looked me up and down before we left the apartment and muttered that I should try harder with my appearance. It wasn't new behavior, but the edge in his voice told me he was unsettled. He accused me more than once of thinking I was too good for him, as if my pulling away was some kind of betrayal rather than self-preservation. I kept my responses measured, never letting him see how much his words burned. Instead, I smiled tightly, nodded when necessary, and kept moving forward with my plans. On the surface, I played the role he expected, but behind the mask I was already charting my escape. Every cruel remark only reminded me why leaving was the only option. As I listened to him complain and sneer, something inside me finally clicked into place. Ryan didn't view me as his partner, not in any real sense. To him, I wasn't someone to share life with. I was his safety net, the person he leaned on so he wouldn't have to stand on his own. He saw my efforts as endless, my patience as unbreakable. That belief made him careless, and it was exactly what I needed. While he assumed I'd always be there, I was already planning the moment I wouldn't be. About a week later, Ryan decided to host a small get-together at our place. He acted like it was casual, but I could tell he wanted an audience. A few of his buddies showed up, along with a couple of my friends, and soon the living room was filled with chatter and glasses clinking. On the surface, it looked like a normal evening, but I knew better. It didn't take long for Ryan to start in on me. With everyone gathered around, he leaned back in his chair and tossed out a cutting remark about how I wasn't exactly excelling at work. A few people chuckled awkwardly, and I could feel eyes darting toward me, waiting for my reaction. Instead of shrinking back or firing up, I simply smiled and stayed quiet. He didn't expect that. His jabs kept coming. About my habits, my choices, even the way I decorated the apartment. Each time, I held my composure, offering nothing more than a calm look or a small shrug. The room grew tense. His friends shifted in their seats, no longer laughing quite so freely. Megan caught my eye across the table, her face stern, as though silently telling me to stay strong. The more I stayed collected, the more unsettled Ryan became. His voice grew louder, his words harsher, as though he needed to push harder to get a reaction out of me. But the effect was the opposite of what he wanted. Instead of turning people against me, his behavior made him look cruel and insecure. The mood in the room soured, and the energy that he had tried to control slipped away from him. I sat there steady, letting him dig his own hole. Inside, I realized something valuable. Ryan's arrogance blinded him. He thought humiliating me would always give him the upper hand, but he couldn't see that everyone else was starting to notice who he really was. That night showed me exactly how careless he had become, and how close I was to having the upper hand. I knew the time was getting close. The more Ryan pushed, the more determined I became to make sure I was ready. Quietly, I took the last steps to secure my freedom. The first thing I did was cut my ties to anything we shared financially. One afternoon on my way home from work, I stopped at the bank and removed my name from the accounts we both had access to. Walking out with the paperwork in my hand, I felt lighter than I had in years. Next came my personal belongings. I didn't dare risk him noticing big changes, so I moved things a little at a time. Important papers, jewelry, a few family heirlooms. All of it went straight to Daniel's house. My brother didn't ask many questions. He just cleared out a drawer in his study and told me I could keep whatever I needed there. Each trip gave me more peace of mind, knowing my most valuable items were no longer sitting in an apartment Ryan could control. The final piece was finding a place of my own. I met with a landlord on a quiet street not far from where I worked. The apartment wasn't large, but it was clean, safe, and, most importantly, mine. Signing the lease felt like planting a flag in the ground, proof that I had already started my new life, even if Ryan didn't know it yet. I arranged the move carefully, making sure nothing would give me away until I was ready. At home, Ryan stayed oblivious. He strutted around as if nothing could change, still tossing out careless remarks and acting like he held all the cards. He believed I was too attached, too invested, too dependent to walk away. What he didn't realize was that the ropes tying me to him had already been cut, one by one, without him noticing. So I kept my mouth shut. I smiled when I needed to, answered his questions casually, and never hinted at the truth. Inside, though, I was waiting for the right moment. The moment when I could finally show him he had been wrong all along. When the day came, I played my role carefully. I told Ryan I wanted to smooth things over after the tension we'd had, and I suggested a small dinner with our usual circle. He seemed pleased with the idea, as if I was finally falling back into place. What he didn't know was that this was the stage I had been setting all along. We gathered at a restaurant downtown, the same friends who had seen our arguments and his mockery before. The table was filled with casual chatter at first, plates being passed around, glasses clinking. Ryan slipped easily into his old habits, leaning back in his chair like he owned the room. Before long, he turned his attention toward me, tossing out one of his usual digs about how I couldn't handle much without him. A few people gave uneasy smiles the same way they always had. But this time I didn't flinch. I placed my fork down, looked straight at him, and spoke evenly. "You're wrong, Ryan. The truth is, you've been leaning on me the entire time." The table went silent. His smirk faltered, but I kept going. I laid it all out. How I had covered rent, how I had paid his debts, how I had signed for the loan he promised would change our lives but never did. I told them that while he was busy tearing me down, I was the one keeping a roof over his head. The words hung heavy in the air. No one dared to interrupt. Ryan tried to laugh it off at first, but his voice cracked under the weight of what I was saying. Then I delivered the part one had been holding back. I wasn't just done funding his life, I was leaving. I explained that I had already made arrangements, that my money was no longer his safety net, and that after tonight he would be standing on his own. He stared at me, speechless for the first time in as long as I could remember. Around us, the others shifted uncomfortably, realizing the truth they hadn't seen clearly before. For once, the humiliation wasn't mine to carry, it was his. And I didn't feel the slightest bit sorry. Walking away felt like stepping into a new world. My apartment was small but bright, and for the first time in years, every corner of it belonged to me. There was no tension in the air, no sarcastic remarks waiting when I walked through the door. I could breathe. While I was finding peace in my own space, Ryan's reality was unraveling without me there to hold it together. I didn't see it firsthand, but word reached me quickly through friends we had in common. The landlord had been after him within weeks. Without my paycheck covering most of the rent, he couldn't keep up. He tried to stall, but excuses don't pay bills, and soon the threat of eviction became real. Not long after, I heard his car had been taken back. He had fallen behind on payments, and with no one left to bail him out, the bank didn't wait. Even basic things like electricity and water became a struggle for him. Each update was another reminder of how deeply he had depended on me. The man who once acted like I couldn't manage without him was now barely managing without me. Friends who had once laughed nervously at his jokes now described him as bitter and desperate, a shell of the person he used to be. Meanwhile, I was thriving in ways I hadn't expected. My new place felt like a sanctuary. I filled it with things that made me happy. Plants by the windows, photos of family, little touches that reminded me who I really was outside of that relationship. I reconnected with Daniel, spent more time with Megan, and slowly built back the confidence that had been chipped away. I realized how much energy I had wasted trying to keep someone else afloat. Hearing about Ryan's decline didn't bring me joy, but it didn't bring me sorrow either. It simply confirmed what I already knew. He had never stood on his own. Without me, the structure he leaned on collapsed. And for once, I wasn't the one left in ruins. Looking back, I can admit leaving wasn't simple. It tore at me to walk away from someone I had invested years of my life in, but staying would have cost me far more. The night I stepped out of that relationship, I chose myself for the first time in a long time, and that choice changed everything. Yes, it hurt. Betrayal always does. But from that pain came clarity. I realized how much strength I had buried under the weight of Ryan's control. Once I set it free, I could finally stand tall again. His collapse was never my victory to claim. It was simply the natural result of the life he built on my back. I didn't need to celebrate it. I only needed to keep moving forward. What mattered most was freedom. No more cruel jokes at my expense. No more being treated like less than I am. I walked out of that restaurant humiliated, but in truth, that moment became the start of my liberation. Choosing to leave turned the lowest point of my life into the beginning of a stronger one. And I know now, the greatest act of respect is the one you give yourself, by refusing to stay where you're mocked, diminished, or unloved. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have given him another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.